I'm supposed to be live, but here we're going to spend our usual 30 seconds guessing. This is my least favorite part. Good thing there's nobody here. Oh, there I am. Okay. All right. Perfect. Oh, there I am. Oh, and now I can hear me. Okay. Hi, Tracy. Okay. So I'm hiding upstairs because my family is downstairs and we have a really open concept house. So this is the only way that you're not going to hear whatever they're watching in the background. Okay, so today I'm talking about shadow work and then making your subconscious reprogramming work. And hi, Angie. I'm glad that you are tuning in from the barn. I imagine you must be with your horses. Okay, so I wanted to, talk about shadow work. And then I'm gonna kind of throw in some cool things at the end that I mentioned or that I found about just some research that shows that we really do project our consciousness into other, and we can project it into other people. And then I'll just give you kind of the rundown of that, and then you guys can run with it, and then I might revisit that. But and then I'm going to explain also why it is that I talk about all the weird science, outside from the fact that it's cool and I love it. So shadow work. So when we're living consciously and our energy is really high, we can be the best version of ourselves. But because energy always seeks like the easiest path, we tend to always, we tend to unconsciously revert to basically our lowest setting. And so as you go through life and you have these experiences that have caused you to make up rules about yourself or to push parts of yourself into the unconscious, then that actually affects your overall vibrational set point, right? So, and if I was going to align this to like devil language, I would say that basically you can't move into an assumption if you're carrying, I guess, an unseen assumption about yourself, right? So this is why people will have a hard time moving into the assumption and really staying there, because they're carrying a different assumption to be about themselves. And so we want to shift these set points. And to do that, that's where you're going to do your shadow work and your subconscious reprogramming. And I don't know what it is about lives, but the minute I get on live these days, my nose starts itching like crazy. So this is going to drive me nuts. So, as we grow up, so perhaps your teacher said, oh, well, you're to this or you're to that. And so in order to be good, we would push that part of ourselves into the unconscious. And therefore, your psychology causes you as like a protection mechanism to kind of like phase out. So you kind of go unconscious. Yeah, it might be my subconscious. Sorry, I have to itch my nose. It's making me crazy. And this was the last time I was on live. This happened too. So I don't know what it is, but it's definitely in my subconscious. And so basically, this is why we tend to get tripped up. This is why when we want to do things, the fear will come up. It's essentially, it's kind of telling you what your rules are. So, and so the reality that you experience, or I guess your identity, is based as much as on who you see yourself to be consciously, but also who you are in the unconscious. So all the things about yourself that you may not really be aware of. And so because the reality we experience is really based on identity, like beliefs are important, right? Reality is seated in belief, but your identity actually determines the beliefs that you're willing to accept or reject. And so this is really important to understand especially if you want to make subconscious reprogramming work for you, and you maybe are finding that you are challenged in some areas. And it's because you are most likely carrying around an unconscious, something that like an unconscious aspect of your identity. And so I always like to really clarify that I don't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It's just essentially like patterns of being. And so these patterns make up your identity. And so shifting identity, it's the fastest way to create the life that you want. But your identity, as I said, is made up of that conscious and unconscious. So if you're just going to focus on shifting the conscious, this is where you are going to find that you kind of get tripped by it. You hit walls, you're getting tripped up. And this is really just like your unconscious patterns of thinking and behavior that are keeping you in your current identity, because your current identity is safe. And so it brings up resistance, right? So whenever you try to move into being a different person, certain things are going to trigger this resistance to tell you, no, you don't actually think that this is who you are. And so this is, again, the really where shadow work can really begin to kind of remove some of these blocks. And so resistance, it shows up as, and I'm just going to list these so that any of you can recognize if you have resistance around what you want to create. So internal conflict, it shows up as internal conflict, and it can create feelings of anxiety or procrastination and indecision, anger, or that internal conflict. Have you ever experienced this? Fear that it can't happen for you, that you're fooling yourself, and that you're just going to put in all this time and nothing will happen. So that's something in your identity. That is not like that is not everybody has that. That's what I'm trying to spit out. So that is an aspect of who you believe yourself to be. And so if you have that in there, it's worthwhile maybe doing some exploring around that. So we also have psychological defenses. So this is like cynicism, passive aggressive responses, starting an argument to get your feelings across, or moving into a victim mindset. And so I really want to clarify with victim mindset that I'm really not negating the fact that there are oppressed people, that people are assaulted, that there are people who really are victimized. There are dangerous situations, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like, so-and-so did this or didn't do this, and that made me feel, right? Because we always choose the way we feel. We may have it patterned into us that it comes up, but we choose whether or not to keep it, whether or not to accept it, whether or not to identify with it, because, and I'm not saying that it happens like this. You might have to practice your way into this, but you do, if you decide that you are the master of your own consciousness, right? So yeah, then you can decide, am I really going to just align myself to this feeling? Or does this feeling show me that I kind of am thinking that I'm someone and I want to be someone else? And I guess I don't mean that I'm not manifesting into the highest version of myself. That's what I mean, because there's nothing wrong with you. So an unwillingness to consider new ideas, or a know-it-all attitude. I've 100% been guilty of this one. But so when people, so I will come across people often, and they kind of struggle with some of the manifesting concepts because they have a block around and this is an identity block. So I'm logical. That's something that I've heard. Well, nobody said that you had to not be logical. Or, you know, basically where they will come up with various arguments about why it's not possible is essentially what this usually is showing. And so then I want to ask these people, if you want to manifest, but you're unwilling to accept ideas that align with creating your life, that I'm telling you that you need to really reconsider that position, and ask yourself, what is it you are getting from wanting to create while also denying yourself in a really subtle way that you create. And so, yeah, I'm logical. I can't fully believe this. These are all things that are like psychological defenses, and that basically are connected to aspects of identity, right? So I see myself as a logical thinker, and I cannot imagine that, I can just shift my state of being, and the world around me shifts. So yeah, again, I ask people who kind of struggle with that, what is it that you're actually getting from really living with this, with these two contrasting aspects. Other ways that resistance can show up is like a narrow focus on minor details. So what is happening in this very moment for you when you are creating something bigger is definitely a focus on the minor details that these are secondary issues, and they can block you from aligning with that bigger picture, right? It can't happen for me because this is happening right now. So, I mean, that's not really acknowledging the fact that the main thing about life is the nature of change. It's always going to change. So just because it's like this now doesn't mean it's always going to be like this. Anyone that's ever had a breakup will tell you they thought it was always going to be like this, and then surprise. So there's no reason it can't go back the other way. But again, this goes back to the unwillingness to consider that maybe our original ideas of what constitutes a salvageable relationship or not are worth challenging. Okay, so other ways that resistance shows up is, so I guess this even moving into, not moving away from a narrow focus. So when we are really focused on what's happening right now, what we are almost really subtly insinuating is that we are not a conscious creator of our reality. So you may consciously tell yourself you believe that you create, but if you're looking at this situation right now as a reflection of what's possible for you or what's happening, or whether or not you can or can't create, you're focusing on the minutia, and that's taking away from really you being able to align yourself with the identity of being a creator. And so of all the identities that you really want to begin to align with the most, that is one of the, or if not the most important. And you don't have to necessarily believe you're the only creator. A lot of people manifest perfectly well believing that they are co-creators of the universe. So it doesn't matter where your belief systems fall. Everybody can manifest because we're doing it all the time. And so whether you are able to successfully or not really depends on where your identity aligns with being a conscious creator, and in those really subtle ways. And so if you have a really strong identification with your old flawed self, and again, I use flawed kind of loosely because there's technically not anything wrong with you, but if you have, so for example, say you want to be really successful in a certain area, but you don't want to put yourself out there. You don't want to market. You don't want to do any of the things that technically people do. Then you want to take a look at that because that is an alignment with an identity that's not aligned with reality that you want. Right. And so in terms of relationships, if you want to continually align yourself as being the person who is being, who something is happening to, then that is, again, an identification with a version of you that isn't aligned with the life you want to have. And I mean, you can always tell when you have an identification with that old version of you, because you're going to have the stories come up. I'm this way because, or the stories that tell you what you can and can't do, and about who you are. Like, I was a terrible partner, so this, you know, can never happen. It's all my fault. This situation happened. Those are the big ones that I see. And those are not serving you. So understand these are resistance, right? Because the buy off of maintaining these is that you always remain safe. There's never that potential for rejection. And while that's not the only thing that often keeps people sort of aligned to their resistance, that's a big one. So sometimes people will have an unwillingness to do what's in their best interest, and this kind of aligns with getting caught focusing on the minutia. So if you are really focused on what's happening and what's not happening and where are all the signs, you need to see some signs, and you're not really paying attention to what actually matters in your best interest, which is your emotional alignment and being like in the right focus, then you are basically stubbornly refusing to really put your energy where it matters the most. And instead you may catch yourself looping in this like, it's happening, I think it's happening, oh, this thing shows me it's not, and then you go back, right? So you will go up, and then you're really externally driven, I guess. You're really your manifesting is driven by what you see external to you, and that is not in your best interest. So if you keep going back to that and you are not stopping yourself, I highly suggest you start noticing. Write it down if you have to. Start like taking track of, these are all the places that I get caught. Other resistance is like people who, and I kind of talked about it before, we push everything into our subconscious that we don't actually want to look at, or that we reject. And so this can cause us to be caught in these like self-defeating or sabotaging thoughts or thought patterns or behaviors. And so this is just where you're being directed by your unconscious behaviors, and a lot of them are there to keep you safe. And so you just want to really start to become more aware of these. And so I want to kind of align this to subconscious work, because in my opinion, and it's not the only opinion out there, but if you are doing the subconscious work and you are finding you see results and then you don't see results, or you see results and then, or you don't see results, then there is a very high likelihood that you should be adding some shadow work into your unconscious, your subconscious reprogramming work. Because if your set points are low, then these are what are going to be stopping your subconscious reprogramming. And so this is because your subconscious is not just your mind. So when you're only focusing on the mental aspect, you're cutting out a really big portion of what's going to support your success. So unconscious reprogramming, it can be done a lot of different ways. There's some really powerful ways that a coach can just help clear those internal triggers. And there are a lot of processes that you can just do at home. So it sort of depends on like the level that you're looking for, the level of support. Do you have a friend that you can rely on to just be really brutally honest with you? Because a lot of times we don't see our own blind spots, and that is in essence why it's unconscious. And so basically I personally have done both, and there are a few points that I guess I wanted to talk about to really help you make your unconscious, subconscious reprogramming really start to kind of work better for you. And so the number one is to oh yeah, your friend who points out your blind spots. Yeah. It's good to have one. I mean, I know I have one. And yeah, she's amazing. So you want to, so the things you want to consider in order to make your subconscious reprogramming start to work for you. The number one thing that you need to do, this isn't really my opinion. This is, well, I guess maybe it's my opinion. But this is kind of the number one area that I see people not getting the results they're expecting, is that they go in more passively. So you're going to get the best results when you decide that you are in charge, and you're going to start noticing the internal alignments that conflict with your your desired identity. In my opinion, subconscious reprogramming is not necessarily a set it and forget it. Sure, some people are going to get more results passively than others because we have different subconscious set points. But if you are not getting the results you want, it's really important to stop looking at subconscious reprogramming as something that other people do for you, just like a throw it in, turn it on, and forget about it. Yeah, you want to be intentional. Don't just go like hoping that this will work. Decide this is going to work for you. And don't come into it like, well, I had this thing done for me and there's nothing else I need to do. It's just because we're constantly programming ourselves. Every time we interact with the environment, every time we make a meaning, every time we have an emotional response to something, every time we have success or failure, whatever our internal dialogue is, Angie. Yeah, that's, I have my own opinions on that. So basically, you don't want to look at it as set it and forget it, and you want to be intentional. You want to decide it's going to work for you, right? Because in deciding that it's going to work for you, you are going to go in, and then now this is where the decision and intention part comes. When you feel like it's not working for you, you have to shift out of that focus. And the thing is, because your subconscious is not just your mind, your subconscious is as I said, your emotional experiences, the meanings you make, all of these things kind of are tied together to create this beautiful braid or this beautiful tapestry of what we call the unconscious. It's not just one thing. And so the more intentional you are about it, the more you notice, ooh, I am triggered in this environment. And then you kind of maybe do that shadow work, and then you do like some unconscious reprogramming that includes everything I'm going to mention a little bit later. Then that intentionality will eventually everything that you are everything you're being intentional about will become unconscious. And so you are essentially shifting your unconscious patterning that way. And that is why, in my opinion, intentionality is really the most important. Like awareness, be aware of what's happening inside of you, because this is, reprogramming your subconscious is not just a set it and forget it. It's happening in every single second of the day. You are taking in information and making meanings and having emotional responses, and whether or not it aligns with the old patterns or whether it aligns with the patterns you're creating, you decide. And so this is also why you want to consider environment. Environment can be huge. So I have always said that mental diet is really less like flipping thoughts. And I am very well aware of Neville's lecture, and I feel that he was also not saying just check your thoughts. He was actually checking what perspective are you coming from. So it's not about just necessarily flipping thoughts. It's about it's two things. So the first is what you put in. So if I am constantly confirming so let's say I want to manifest someone, and I'm constantly doing things and talking to people that is going to reconfirm over and over and over that I don't have it, what do you think you're programming in? I don't even care if you are doing the unconscious work, because the most effective unconscious programming is your experience, your interface with reality. So unless you've learned to disconnect yourself from that, and that's, you know, that's like the observer. So if you want your subconscious programming work better for you, then really start to notice where in your environment you can take out the things that don't support what you're creating. And then the next thing with mental diet is what you allow to stay. So you could, again, look at this as flipping thoughts, but that's really like the longest way you could go about doing this. You want to notice, like, what does that thought indicate? Who does it indicate that I'm being? And like, right, that's going to give you a like direct line to your subconscious beliefs. Because again, beliefs and identity, like your identity, determine what beliefs you take on. So other ways to make your subconscious programming really work for you, as I talked about a little at little nauseum earlier, is shadow work. So understand that if you have resistance coming up, that you want to deal with that resistance, that all the subconscious programming in the world, it's going to take a lot longer. I don't want to say it won't happen, but it's going to take it's the long way. Why would you take that? Just, you know, except I understand shadow work, not my favorite, but I always feel so much more amazing afterwards. It's worth it. And so you always kind of want to be like aligning yourself with that version of you, and then releasing the aspects that are resistant to you being that version. And so that's, again, where the shadow work comes in. But I think that, and so this is kind of going back to like that combination of intentionality and environment, that the number one thing that you need to understand if you need help reprogramming your unconscious and have it work for you, is to acknowledge that the emotional and physiological piece, that the unconscious is tied into your nervous system response, and it's the main way that you interface with reality. So if you're working only from the mind and letting the emotions run opposite to that direction, then it's slowing you down, or it's completely blocking your results, because you have not, I mean, how can you really believe that you're successful if you get into certain situations and you have intense anxiety, or that you are loved when you are doing the work, doing the mental work, and your emotions are completely out of alignment with that thing that you're telling yourself, or that you are affirming, or that you are, however you're getting it in there, because there's quite a lot of ways that you can reprogram your subconscious mind. But the hands down, most effective way is going to include the mind-body connection, because it runs in a feedback loop and it's always confirming who you are. And I mean, it's also why feeling is the secret. Because that essentially is tied to meaning and belief and identity, and it's not just one thing. And so if it's not working for you, it's because it's not just one thing. And so, yeah, if you, when you work with someone and they do subconscious reprogramming, it should include levels of like sensory aspects as well as the mind, because that shifts you at like the physiological level. And as I mentioned before, all really is mind, but we have neurons throughout our body. So you are not just changing your mental mind, you're changing your physical mind as well. Okay, so it is 6:30, and I'm not really intending to go out of, I guess, I'm not really intending to go super long with this one. And so I am just gonna talk very briefly on projecting consciousness, but more why I want to talk about this. Not only because I really love interesting and obscure science, and that I just really wanted to talk about the fact that there's current research that's using internet technology to project thoughts from one person to another. No typing, no speaking, just thoughts, which I thought is ridiculously cool. But and William Broad has a very large study encompassing like 37 different experiments. I think it included In fact, I think I probably have some of the details. Yes. So you can look him up. He had 37 experiments, 655 sessions with 449 different influences, and 153 different influencers and 13 different experimenters. So you could say he did a lot of research. And so he basically confirmed that human consciousness can be projected from one human to another, and affect their physiology. So there's a firm basis for remote healing, but this also really aligns with some of the work that I've talked about, basically like subjective communication, the fact that we do have entanglement and we can communicate with other people without speaking a word, and that it is very much, Broad's research determined that it was very much linked to emotional, high levels of emotion, like when, you know, on Dr. David Hawking's emotional scale, it's high levels like, you know, love or gratitude, or all of these higher levels of emotion really allow us to project our consciousness and to change another person's physiology. So for example, they would have two people in two different locations, very similar to the way that Sheldrake did his, you know, dog experiment, but two people in two different areas. And when one was being told to send positive thoughts about the other, the person on the receiving end, their physiology was changing at the same time. And so I tell you this not only because I want to help those people that say to me, I'm logical, so I don't know that I can believe this. Well, in addition to challenging, then why are you trying to manifest? I want to, I guess, help them build that basis for why that this is more than just the you know, woo-woo that it gets a reputation for. There is actually a fairly deep reservoir of research around this. In fact, the CIA has a lot of remote viewing and so on, research that was published over the last, I want to say 5 years. They released it, might be 10. And so, but I also, because your identity needs to be able to align with someone who can create their life, and for which you can connect with someone at the level of consciousness, and not just be caught in this idea of this, that you are only interacting with the three-dimensional aspect of reality. Because until you really are willing to align yourself with someone who believes that, you won't take on those beliefs that you need in order to create that reality. So, okay. Yeah, so I don't necessarily, yeah, if you have any questions. I suspect probably not. This is that waiting time, and I worked in kindergarten, so there wasn't a lot of need for patience, so I'm not always high on patience. Awesome. Okay. All right. So, yeah, hopefully I have given you kind of a foundation for why you definitely want to not skip your shadow work, and why you want to focus on more than the mind. You want to really add intentionality and awareness, and not be the passenger of your subconscious reprogramming, if you want the best results. Like I said, so we all have different set points, so gauge yourself. If you have no problem, you know, you can just run some affirmations and you can create what you want, no problem, then I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the people that I see that maybe are coming up against, I guess, some challenges, and these are some of the considerations. So hopefully that was helpful, and I appreciate you coming, and I will be back next Thursday. And because I can't think of what I want to talk about, I'll probably put out a poll to see what you guys would like to talk about. Okay, until next week, have a fantastic evening.